applications on this. Oh my God, I love it. I love for the plans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second and final meeting of the Board of Adjustment for the month of May. As usual, we have a pretty full agenda this evening. Just before we start, I'll briefly go over the ground rules by which we will proceed. Each topic will be read as to what it consists of, in other words, the official announcement. And then whoever's presenting it will be invited to come up and speak to the board for 15 minutes. If that's not sufficient, we ask that before the speaker starts, that he or she ask for an additional 5 minutes, and the board will vote that request up or down at that time. Following the presentation and questions, if any, from the board, we'll invite people who are in favor of the project to speak for 5 minutes, followed by people in opposition to the request for 5 minutes. And then lastly, a call to, for, or against for speakers without time limitation, but we ask obviously that any such speakers in that frame speak succinctly as possible. So, and people who have spoken previously can come up again if they so, including the applicant, if they so choose. So that's how we're going to proceed. Now, we have one item, under old business and 10 items under new business, one of which is a request to postpone. I can find it here. There we are.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Manno.
I'd like to take item H, the requests of Joel St. John and Mariel Chambers for 108 Burkett Street for the request to postpone.
Thank you. You anticipated my request. Good. Is there a second to that motion to postpone that one?
Second.
Thank you. Anybody on the board have any comments with respect to Burkett Street being postponed at the request of the applicant, obviously? No? Okay. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Passed unanimously. Okay. That brings us to the first item on the agenda. As I said, there's only one item under old business, and it reads as follows. The request of Pamela J. Katz, Revocable Trust owner, for property located at 462 Lincoln Avenue, Unit 4, whereas relief is needed to install a generator which requires the following. 1. A variance from Section 10.515.14 to allow a 6-foot setback where 10 feet is required and to allow the generator to be closer to the street than the principal structure. Said property is located on Assessor Map 133 as Lot 20-4 and lies within the General Residence A GRA District. Who presents this request to the board, please? Please come up. And we ask each speaker to clearly state your name and your address, if you would, please, so we'll have a complete record.
My name is Chris Adams, and my address is 2 Goss Road in Northampton. Good evening to the members of the board. My name is Chris Adams. I'd like to apologize for not being here last week. I didn't know that I needed to present this in person.
Yes,
So
not a problem.
Thank you for the postponement, and also thank you to Peter Stiff for helping me prepare this application. I'm here to request a variance for my mother's property at 462 Lincoln Ave to install a generator. My mother has unfortunately started requiring oxygen 24 hours a day due to emphysema. So having an instant-on generator will alleviate her fears of being without power to run the oxygen machine during the day and while she sleeps. As a resident of Portsmouth on Lincoln Ave for over 20 years, my mother is very comfortable in her home and with the people in her community, in her neighborhood. She's grown very close with her neighbors. Several of them offer support to her when she's in need. Approximately 5 years ago, my mother and stepfather put an addition on that property to plan for the future, including a room that would become a first-floor bedroom to assist them as they aged. Unfortunately, my stepfather passed away last year, and since then I've been helping my mother to make additional changes to the property for her to remain there as long as possible. These changes include a stair lift, moving her into that first-floor bedroom, as well as rearranging countless pieces of heavy furniture at least twice. The generator will be a very positive change to allow her the freedom to remain in her home. This property is on the corner of Lincoln and Union as shown in the plot plan, and the generator will be located inside the fence on the property, 6 feet from the sidewalk on Union and 16 feet from the sidewalk on Lincoln.
Thank you.
Is it 15 minutes?
I hope you've had a chance to look over the 5 criteria that we vote upon. If you could touch on those 5 items, that would be very helpful.
Yes, I have them in the application. Dot 21, variance not being contrary to public interest. So due to the minimal nature of the change to the property, I would not think there would be any change to the public interest. The size of the generator is 46 by 26 by 28. It'll be in the same area of the yard as existing mechanical equipment, air conditioning condensers. The generator should be silent when in standby mode, and only 65 to 68 dBA when in use. My understanding is also there's a weekly startup for about 15 to 20 minutes to charge the battery as well. 22, the spirit of the ordinance will be observed. So most of these use of land, buildings, and structures for business has no impact. Number 2, intensity of the land use and lot sizes, no impact. Design of facilities for vehicular access is no impact. Impact of properties on outdoor lighting and noise. So noise is the only potential impact a generator could have. There aren't that many power losses in the city and the area she lives in, so I would think that would be a small impact. And I would think that this gas generator would be quieter than temporary rollout generators that residents frequently use. As for the preservation and enhancement of the visual environment, again, the generator is a minimal size, and my mother is an avid gardener still, with very large gardens on her property, and likely she will be doing her best to hide the generator as well on her own. The building is not in a historic district, and for protection of natural resources, minimal impact. The device is likely more efficient than temporary gas-powered generator. Dot 23, substantial justice. By granting the variance, justice will be done. The spirit of the ordinance is maintained, and the notion of fairness is upheld. It would seem unfair for the resident to have to abandon her home for 20 years for the matter of the generator being several feet outside the ordinance rules. Property values not being diminished. I would expect this would raise her property value, having an instant-on generator on the property. So I don't believe there will be any diminishment of other properties in the area. And dot 25, resulting in unnecessary hardship because the owner's critical reliance on her oxygen machine, not being able to install a generator would be a hardship for her. Her desire is to remain in the home as long as possible. And that's what I have.
Very good, thank you. Any questions from the board at this point? Anybody at all? Mr. Mantle? No? No? Okay. Right. Mr. Lee?
So did you say the generator, when it's running, is about 65 decibels? Is that?
Yeah, according to the documentation I found, it was 65 to 68 when it's in full use.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anybody else? Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. Is anyone present who would like to speak in support? Anybody support? Anybody speakers? No? Apparently not. Anybody present who would like to speak in opposition? Anyone in opposition? Anybody to, for, or against? Last call. And I'll just check on the Zoom with Mr. Stith. No?
Nobody.
Nobody? Thank you. Okay. Last call for speakers. Apparently none. We'll close the public hearing. Okay, board. What is your pleasure on this first piece of business?
Well, Mr. Chair, this seems like a pretty benign request. I'd be prepared to make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second, Mr. Mantle. Thank you. Mr. Lee, your motion.
Well, I'll take the first 2 criteria in order. The variance is not contrary to the public interest, and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. The use of it is not in conflict with any of the explicit or implicit purposes of the ordinance, and it doesn't alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten any public health, safety, welfare, or anything of that nature. Substantial justice is be done because the benefit to the applicant is not outweighed by any harm to the general public. And as the applicant said, having an instant-owned generator would not in any way detract from the value of surrounding properties. And number 5, literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. In this case, the hardship would be the medical condition of the resident there, and there's no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the ordinance and the application of this property. Just for a comparison, normal conversation's about 60 decibels, so if this generator operating is at 65 decibels, I doubt if you're standing 2 blocks down the road, you couldn't hear it. So, no noise problem there. So, for those reasons, I would move that we accept this, approve this application as presented and advertised.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manley, a second.
Everything Mr. Lee said, it's a generator for use in case of emergency. I drove by the property today. I'm familiar with the townhouses. It's an enclosed, fenced, wrought iron fence garden and has the permission of the association. So for that, I will support the motion.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything further? Anything further? We have a motion to approve, and last call for comment. None? Okay. Those in, we'll go down and do a roll call vote on this. Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
And I vote, thank you. I vote the same, yes as well. So you're all set. You're approved.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, that takes care of old business. Moving on to new business. Item A is as follows. The request of Joseph Ritchie, or Rissy, or whatever the correct pronunciation is, applicant for property located at 225 Banfield Road, whereas relief is needed to demolish existing building and construct a new 5-unit commercial building and a 60-unit residential building with underground parking, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow a 45-foot front yard where 70 feet is required. 2, a variance from section 10.440 to allow a 60-unit residential building where residential uses are not permitted in the industrial district. Said property is located on Assessor Map 254 as Lot 1 and Map 266 as Lot 1 and lies within the industrial district. Who speaks in favor, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm Chris Mulligan from Boson & Associates here in Portsmouth on behalf of JRDEV LLC. Here with me is John Ritchie, the principal of JRDEV and also the principal of Ritchie Construction. Also with us in the back of the room is Greg Michaelides, the consulting engineer on this project. Our proposal before you tonight is one in which we propose to merge 2 contiguous lots on Banfield Road. One of those lots already has a non-conforming commercial building on it that is the current headquarters of Ritchie Construction. Ritchie Construction is a local construction company that's been in business for 87 years. Mr. Ritchie's son is the 4th generation owner of the business, so this is a well-established local outfit. One lot already has a non-conforming commercial building on it. One lot is vacant and undeveloped. Together, if these are merged, we will have almost 10 acres on which we propose to place a new 5-unit commercial building, which will be the new home of Ritchie Construction, and a 60-unit residential apartment building in the rear. I think it's important to note that the existing industrial and commercial usage of the property will remain intact with this proposal. There will still be a commercial and industrial presence at the front of the property, and the introduction of the new component is obviously the 60-unit apartment building that we're requesting approval for tonight. A couple of unique things about this property, I think. First of all, it's relatively large. It's almost 10 acres when combined. It has frontage in 2 discontinuous spots along Banfield Road. There's a fair amount of wetlands in the western part and the rear part of the property. There's a fair amount of ledge on the property. These things push the developable area towards the east and towards Banfield Road, which is where you see the proposed improvements on the plans that we've submitted. The other thing is the surrounding uses in the vicinity are a mix of residential and commercial. There's a relatively new residential subdivision across Banfield Road from this property. There's residential uses on the western side of the property, and then there's commercial uses on the eastern side. You've got Pike Industries, and then there's a commercial building with frontage on Banfield Road. So in many ways, this property is part of a transitionary or is appropriately located to be a transition from primarily residential to primarily commercial, and what we're proposing is a little bit of both. There's also a unique situation with this property. I mentioned Ritchie Construction has been a long-time fixture in Portsmouth. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. But the family has owned this property for over 60 years. So that means that there is 0 acquisition costs. That provides a lot of opportunity, and what we're going to talk to you about is using the opportunity we have to meet what we feel is a considerable need in the community. The other thing that is unique to the situation is that Ritchie Construction will remain a presence on this property. This will be their new headquarters. That means there will be boots on the ground and eyes on the property. So this, I think you can be confident, will be a well-run and well-maintained facility if it's approved and built. The other prefatory thing I would mention before I get into the variance criteria is there is clearly an issue in the city of Portsmouth regarding the number of housing units and the cost of those housing units. This has been talked about for years amongst people in the city. In 2016, the city council created a commission to study and propose solutions to housing and the housing shortage. And what they concluded was the city needed to take some creative solutions or take some creative steps to find solutions for placing housing in unconventional spaces and at unconventional densities. And that's what we're proposing tonight. We're not proposing new construction of high-end units, which would not solve the housing problem. We are increasing the number of housing units, but more importantly, in my opinion, we're increasing the diversity of types of housing in the city. What we're proposing is a development that would have roughly half studios and half one-bedroom apartments. The studios would be 500 to 700 square feet. The one-bedroom apartments would be 700 to 1,000 square feet. So these are of relatively modest size, and they would be, we believe, appropriate and desirable for young professionals and people within the workforce that are currently being squeezed with the cost of housing and rents in the city of Portsmouth. Just a couple of points on certain nomenclature, what these are not. These are not micro units. Micro units are specifically defined in your ordinance to be units of up to, I believe, 400 square feet. So these are a bit larger than that. These are also not affordable housing or workforce units as is defined in your ordinance. So if any of the materials I've submitted, or if in any of the discussion tonight I use either of those terms, I'm not using the terms affordable or workforce in the sense that your ordinance contemplates providing that type of housing in order to get a density bonus or some other benefit which is permitted in certain zones. Here we are simply seeking a use variance for a 60-unit apartment building, and the apartments will be studios and one-bedroom apartments, so they would not qualify as workforce housing under the ordinance. So that's kind of the preface of what we're proposing. Again, we feel this is a very important opportunity for the city to add to its housing stock. Both the gross numbers of housing will be increased, but also, more significantly, we are proposing to create some diversity in the housing stock, a type of housing where it doesn't exist now, and at sizes and hopefully at costs that will be more affordable and more economical than much of the housing that's existing in the city. The other important thing to note is that the property abuts to the rear the community campus. So that is another opportunity we feel to afford the ability to have amenities that will be very desirable and useful to residents in very close proximity to this development. The plans that we've proposed show that there will be a walking trail so you can access the community campus facilities and fields directly from the residential apartment building that we're proposing. So with that said, I would like to just address the 5 criteria necessary to grant the variances. The first 2 you take together under the Malachi-Glenn decision, and that is, granting the variance will not be contrary to the public interest, nor will it be contrary to the spirit of the ordinance. Here, you have to determine that if the variances are granted, the project would not substantially alter the characteristics of the neighborhood or threaten the health, safety, or welfare of the public. Here, we believe those criteria are met. As I stated before, we feel this is a transitionary property where there is a mix of residential and commercial and industrial uses on either side of it. What we're proposing would contain some industrial and commercial use, and it would contain some residential use. Those are all uses that exist in the close proximity of this property. We submitted with our application an aerial photo, which should be in your packets, which show commercial uses to the east of the property, Pike Industries and T. Bayer, which is a commercial property, the existing Ritchie Construction commercial property, and then to the west, we've got the Arnold residential and the Croto residential properties. So there's a mixture of residential and commercial throughout the immediate vicinity, and this would be in keeping with that, so it would not change the character of the neighborhood. Health, safety, and welfare of the public, we believe, would be enhanced. We feel that we would be improving the nonconformity of the existing commercial building. It's currently at about 34 feet from Banfield Road. We're proposing to push that back to 45. So that is an improvement that makes this more conforming, and the residential component of the project will provide needed housing at a time when the city's housing stock is not addressing this particular demographic. This is aimed at what we call the, quote, missing middle. This will provide an opportunity for housing for people who are otherwise not able to take advantage of Portsmouth's market. The property itself is only about 3 miles from downtown, so it's easily accessible to all of the things that people like about Portsmouth. We intend to install bike racks, underground parking, a number of amenities that will allow residents to take advantage easily and safely of the various amenities that Portsmouth has to offer. This has obviously got to go through full site review before it gets approved, so the health, safety, and welfare of the public is adequately protected as we move forward. The next criteria is that the proposed use would not diminish surrounding property values. You should have letters of support for this property from at least 2 of the abutters to the property. The industrial use that we're proposing, the new building is allowed by right and would be less non-conforming than the existing building, so a new, more conforming building will only improve property values. The residential apartment building that we're proposing, our goal is to attempt to tuck that behind the commercial building, so its visibility from Banfield Road hopefully will be limited. I'm sure as we go through site review, should this project move forward, there will be other betterments and improvements that will be required of us in terms of landscaping, et cetera. So we believe that values of surrounding properties will not be negatively affected by what we're proposing. Substantial justice, here you have to balance the loss to the applicant should the variance be denied against some perceived gain to the general public. Here, by right, the amount of development we could do on this property could result in another acre of asphalt or concrete and a significant amount of commercial and industrial use on this property. We don't believe that's in anyone's best interest, and the substantial justice in allowing this project to go forward is that it would provide or allow us to take advantage of the opportunity that is being presented here. We've got a long-standing ownership group that will remain on the property and be able to take care of it while they're producing a project that addresses a significant problem that the city has identified and discussed for many, many years. Then finally, unnecessary hardship. Here, we don't believe that there's a fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinance and their specific application to this property due to special conditions of the property. The location of the property, its relatively large size, the fact that it's got 2 distinct, discrete frontages that are non-contiguous on Banfield Road. It's got a fair amount of wetlands and ledge that need to be protected and are not developable, are all unique characteristics of this property that differentiate it from others in the neighborhood. It has a significant advantage in that it abuts the community campus and the athletic fields and has proximity to those, and we can get access to those. So we believe that those are unique characteristics of this property such that there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of either the front yard setback requirement or the limitation prohibiting residential use on this property and their application to this specific parcel. This is a location that we feel is very suitable for multifamily residential development. The proposed use is reasonable. The commercial building is allowed by right, and the residential building is a creative solution to a longstanding problem by citing residential use in an unorthodox location. So we believe that all the criteria for the variances are met. Happy to answer any of your questions, as I know Mr. Ritchie is, but we really hope that you agree with us that this is an opportunity that really has very little downside and should be approved.
Thank you. Any questions from the board at this point? Ms. Margison, and then Ms. Eldridge.
Why don't you go first?
No, I'm still thinking.
Okay.
I guess my question was going to be, why is it necessary for you to seek the variance for the distance from the road?
Well-
See, I wasn't formed yet, because I know it's a large piece of land, and I'm wondering if it's wetlands, ledge.
Well, so there is wetlands and ledge to the rear of the property that kind of forces the developable area to the front. But we also want to maintain a suitable separation between the commercial use and the residential use. So I don't know if there's a specific design criteria that requires that, but, I think our goal is to create some degree of, safe and healthy separation.
Good evening, John Ritchie, excuse me. One of the reasons is if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see that pink portion.
Yes.
The further we move the commercial building back, the wetlands kind of come in on either side. So by going from 35 to 45, it limits our wetland impact. If we were to go to the 70 feet, you'd have a greater wetland impact than what we're proposing now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Margison?
Yes, I have a few questions, if I can just address them all.
Certainly,
One.
absolutely.
Okay. So, Chris, just a couple of questions. The Ritchie headquarters that will be built, why is that industrial and not office?
Well, I believe it's not only the Ritchie headquarters, it'll be 5 units, so there will be, warehouse and other industrial uses available to it. But my understanding is it's an allowed use in that zone anyway.
So I'm just curious as to why this has been industrial, because it seems like there's just office space on the property.
Good evening. 25% of the proposed 17,500 square feet, 25% will be office. The remainder will be industrial, warehousing. For our business alone, 20% of it is just strictly office. The rest is we manufacture, we fabricate some stuff there. So it's really some of the commercial industrial parks.
Okay.
We have a little office in front, and we have production warehouse in the back.
Okay, and what will you be manufacturing and creating, and what kind of industrial activities have taken place on that property in the past?
I would imagine, so for our business, we will fabricate some panels for clean rooms. Basically, you just prefab them on site. I would anticipate you may see plumbing, electrical contractors in there, that sort of thing. That's what we want to keep it. Local contractors that need some space, new space. So it would be more commercial industrial with just a small portion of office.
And is that the kind of work that you've done on this property previously?
We've been doing it for 87 years, yes.
Okay.
And fabricating some small things on our shop limits field time, which saves money, and we do a lot of pharmaceutical work, so, fabricating on site on a pharmaceutical is not preferred. They tend to like you to prefab it, then deliver it and just erect it, so.
Okay, so there will be industrial use on the property. there's a lot of wetlands on this property. I know that they have found some environmental contamination at community campus. Do you know if any of that is part of this property? Have you done an environmental site assessment on this property?
We've not done an environmental site assessment. However, we've owned the property for 70 years, so I've got a pretty good idea of what is on our property.
Okay. And then this is a very significant use variance from industrial to residential. This property has a lot of unique characteristics. It's got the ledge, it's got the wetlands. It's right near Pike Industries, which is a very heavy industrial company, which an apartment building will be right next to. I know there's many ways to rezone a property, but why, and I guess maybe this is a question to you, Chris, why go this route and not try for a zoning amendment that could go through planning board review?
Well, I mean, that is one way to skin the cat, of course. But I think ultimately that takes considerably more time. And, time is definitely a factor when you're talking about development projects. The other thing is, if a substantial portion of the city, I mean, we can't simply spot zone this particular parcel.
I understand that.
So what we would have to do is cobble together some argument that a substantial amount of the industrial zone should be, should allow for this type of use, this, housing use. I think you actually have more control over the process if we request variances, because then they just come to you piece by piece, and you can make a case-by-case determination as to whether or not it's appropriate based on the specific, characteristics of that property. Because otherwise, we would need to, figure out where in the industrial zone it makes sense, and it won't make sense everywhere to cite residential uses. I think, the short answer is it takes too long to go through full bore rezoning. I think the slightly longer answer is it's not as beneficial to the city to take the power away from this board if we do that.
So my concerns is that, it's sort of hard, I guess, in present day Portsmouth to think who needs industrial uses. However, there are industrial uses going on. Clearly Pike Industries is still operating. It's hard for me personally as a board member to know whether or not this property, whether or not industrial uses still have a need in Portsmouth. To me, that's a broader question that I guess the city council or the planning board could actually answer through a more deliberative process. So it's just a question.
And that's a fair point. I mean, you definitely don't want to take all of your eggs out of that basket. But remember, we're not abandoning industrial uses on this property by any stretch. I mean, this is a two-piece puzzle, and a significant piece of that puzzle is the commercial building we're putting there.
So, and then my last question will be, what about the rest of this property where you're going to put the residential use? Why can't you use that for industrial reasons?
Oh, I mean, we could. We just don't think it's as beneficial a use. I mean, we don't have the need, or I don't think Mr. Ritchie perceives the need for that much industrial development on this property. But as I stated, we could do that. I mean, I've got a proposed
Thank you. Thanks.
With the amount of developable property that's, available, we could, put a significant amount of industrial and commercial use on it. And we have a proposed plan, which is, I'm not going to say it's by right, because I don't think we've vetted it enough to make that determination. But, you could have a substantial amount of heavy equipment and traffic and, very significant use on this property. I think there'd be a lot more wetlands impacts if we developed it that way. But again, it's possible. We just don't think it's necessary or really desirable. And, I think, again, the opportunity to do something to create some diversity in the city's housing stock would be lost if we confined ourselves to that. So, we're thinking outside the box here and proposing a creative solution to the problem, and that's why we're doing it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your answers. I just, I absolutely understand. I think everybody in this city understands the needs for this kind of housing, for the diversity, for exactly what you're saying. So I totally get that part, so.
If I can just make one more comment that Chris hit on earlier. When we were looking at this, the thing I like about the residential piece is if the variance is granted, it's about an acre less of impervious that we put out there. I think if we develop by right, I think it's 60 or 70,000 square feet of commercial industrial, a lot more pavement, which is fine, but we thought with the residential component, it fills a need that's real. And again, it's less pavement, it's better for the environment. And I think having community campus right behind it, we have both of our abutter support. And we did bring sewer down the road last fall, so it eliminates septic system for this lot. It allowed the 22 housing units across the street to get off a septic and go in sewer. And our abutter to the east, 11 unit, when their septic fails. So we've brought sewer down the road as well for another environmental positive impact. So I think the residential piece reduces the amount of pavement, which I think is a win for everybody as
Thank
well.
you.
Mr. Mantle?
Let's take these one at a time. I'm assuming the setback is because the current Ritchie Construction Building is going to get demolished, and the new one is going to be more compliant by 10 feet. Okay, that's what I thought. Secondly, and this is probably for staff as well, you have a, let me just get to my right map here. Well, I'm looking at the zoning map from Beverly Hill Road all the way down to Constitution. That side of the street is all zone industrial, correct? According to the zoning map. Yet, we have 3 residences and a school. So I'm assuming that all of those places, even though it's all zone industrial, went to this board and got variances, especially the school.
The school did get approvals. I can't speak to the residences. May have been there before.
And there's still
They
more.
may be non-conforming.
Yeah, but I don't believe any of the
school definitely.
residences predate the zoning, so. Okay. That being said, and there is sewer down the road. And you're doing 60 units. Would you entertain a stipulation?
We would always entertain a stipulation. What's
And this
your
is
pleasure?
Right from John Ritchie. Would you consider, as a stipulation, 6 units be, by definition, the RSA of workforce housing? Because we don't want to come to these boards and talk about workforce housing.
So I think in order to make this project go, and I'll let Mr. Ritchie explain this, he's obviously got a wealth of experience in construction. 60 units was where it penciled out. So
Understood.
it's just not going to make sense to do it at a lower number. If we were to dedicate a portion of the units as workforce housing, we would need to increase the number of units that we're requesting in order to fit them in. Because in order to qualify for workforce housing, the units have to be
For a family of 3.
well, yeah, they've got to be priced at 60 or 80% of the median
Well,
income
we're
for a
talking
family.
rentals, and he's on site,
Right.
okay? So we're only talking 6 units, 10%.
Right, and we can't entertain that stipulation unless we go up to probably 70 units. And John has worked this out, so I can have him address this.
So interestingly enough, hadn't thought of this when we submitted, but I bumped into people when I left town hall on Friday, and I got a call from somebody on Saturday that are very active. I would propose, if we could do 70 units total, I would propose 6 units, 3 be studios, 3 be one bedroom, that are 80%, instead of the 60%, be 80%, which would be roughly $1,450 for a studio and $1,535 for a one bed. I would agree to 6 if we could do 70 units to offset the delta.
I'm making the same request you made of Veridian, John. Okay, 10 units, 9 units, and they agreed, knowing they could make up the difference on the remaining units.
Correct.
Okay? I would just like to see 6, 10% at whatever the RSA states. And for the remaining 54 units, that's up to you. You're the owner, as far as how you want to price them out.
Understood. The purpose of what we're trying to do here is to make them all somewhat reasonable as best we can. So in order to do that, I don't want to raise other units to offset the 10%. I'd like to, if we could increase the density a bit, keep the units where we'd like to keep them, and offer 6 units out of 70 total be workforce. Because I don't want to just raise other units. That's not what we're doing.
Well, I mean,
We're saying the same thing.
No, I understand we're saying the same thing, and, you know, our hearts are in the same place.
They are in the
okay?
same place.
I suspect the reason the Veridian request was made, because once it leaves there, okay, anything can happen, but you know you got those, at that time it was 9 units, 10%.
And they have 2 and 3 bedrooms there, correct?
They're 1, 2, and 3.
Correct. We're just studios and ones.
I understand that.
Okay.
The only time a 2-bedroom comes into place is when the unit is a ownership unit, a condo, because it's a family of 4.
Correct.
Okay, for a rental, it's a family of 3. So it could be a 1-bedroom unit.
Correct. I don't think at 900 square feet, it's going to be a family of 3. But again, if we could, 60 is what we need for the rents that we want to charge. If we want to do 10%, I'm more than glad to do it, Paul. I am. We would need to increase from 66 to 70. If we could do 70 units, I would say we'll do 6 that would be workforce housing, yes.
Well, if you do 70 units, it'd be 7, though. Keep it at 10.
But again, I
understand. I understand.
So,
Okay.
and I think it's the right thing to do. It just, people say, oh, what are you going to charge? With interest rates and where things are, it's just difficult
Oh, understood.
to say where things are going to end up. But,
Understood.
we
We
own
all
the
wish-
property. We've been there for a while. We plan to be there for a long time. I think it's a real need for the city. I think
Oh,
having community campus right behind it, if you haven't walked the property, it's pretty cool.
No doubt. And I have walked the property, by the way. You weren't there. I walked by it.
Great.
Yeah, I understand your point, John. And I know you've already penciled this out. My concern is I can't put a stipulation as to price. I can't, okay? I can put a stipulation as to a number of units being a certain thing. I don't know what that price is right now because I don't know what workforce housing is right now. And that, borrowing from your playbook, is to add that stipulation. That's why I brought it up.
Again, and I'm not saying no. I'm saying, the 80% to me makes it easier to say maybe 66 units at 80% we'll do three studios, 3 one-beds. I'm more than glad to do it, Paul, for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I know.
I think it's the right thing to do, and again, does that set a precedent moving forward that if you grant variances for housing, you got to have a workforce component? Yay, great, right?
I just, okay.
So,
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Who's got the next question? Anybody? Mr. Lee?
Okay. So one's kind of a housekeeping question, more curiosity than anything. I noticed on the application you're looking for 5 units, and I only see 4 on the site plan. Is that just?
I think your staff memo says 4 units, but it should be 5. You're talking about the industrial building, Mr. Lee?
It does, yeah.
Oh, it is 4? I'm sorry. Yeah, then I apologize. It is 4.
No biggie. And another question too is, I wonder, would you anticipate any possible conflict with the residential traffic having to share a common driveway with a commercial?
No, I'm not. And, remember, this is going to require site review. So we know that there was a development across the street that did a traffic study. Banfield Road can support the development we're proposing. If there's an internal conflict, we're going to have to engineer it out. And TAC will take care of that for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else with a question at this point? Apparently not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present who'd like to speak in favor at this point? Anyone else in favor? No? Anyone opposed? Is anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition? Please come up and your name and address, if you would, please.
My name is Larry Major. I'm with Pike Industries, and our address is 650 Peverly Hill Road. If I can come forward, I'll supply written comments for you.
Yes, sure. Start them down there.
Thank you.
So thank you for having the hearing and for hearing our comments. As a direct abutter to the Ricci property, we must oppose the project. The Pike facility is operated on that industrial zone property, servicing the aggregate hot mix and road construction needs of the greater Seacoast area for decades. The crusher unit was put up in 1945, so we've been, not Pike, Iafola was there at that time. The proposal to insert residential housing into an industrial zone, we believe, violates the intent and spirit of zoning within the community. The purpose of zoning is to create areas where similar land uses can coexist without interruption from inconsistent and potentially adverse neighbors. This proposal fails to satisfy each of the 5 criteria for variance in the following ways. The variance will not be contrary to public interest. We believe the variance will be contrary to the public interest of keeping industrial activities co-located, to keep them separate from residential housing where occupancy is a 24/7, 365-day endeavor. The spirit of the ordinance will be observed. The proposal is in direct conflict to the spirit of the ordinance, which is to provide separate locations within the community for the various activities that are necessary for a community. The proposal would also violate the setback requirements and place residences very close to the shared property line that we share with Ricci. Substantial justice would be done. With all due respect to the housing shortage that New Hampshire is experiencing, We believe it's just as unjust to place apartments and residences in an industrial zone as it would be for us to try and place a hot mix asphalt plant in a residential area. The values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. We believe that would be untrue for our property because anybody that's in our business understands exactly how important it is to have very large buffer areas around the business. So we believe that anybody that would be interested in purchasing our property would want a severe reduction in the sale price. At the same time, while the property value would fall, we do believe, we know that there would be increased resources and time spent in addressing concerns that inevitably arise from commingling inconsistent uses of properties. Literal enforcement of provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. As Mr. Ricci has pointed out, he's operated at that location where he is now as a commercial industrial entity for 70 years, and we do not believe that there's a hardship that exists except for the placing of a residential facility on that property. We are aware of the housing challenges that New Hampshire faces in the Seacoast in particular, but with respect to Mr. Ricci's attempt to address this problem, we have to oppose the project. We believe that the proposal is in direct conflict with the intentions of community zoning and that it should be denied. Now to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Manno.
When St. Patrick's put in their campus, did you speak in opposition to that?
So I have lived in the Seacoast area prior for 20 years. I love Portsmouth, and I worked at the 650 Beverly Hill Road facility for probably 10 years. I'm not sure when St. Patrick's was put in, but I was unaware of the.
Approximately 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, I did not personally receive a public notice on it, so I did not, and I would anticipate that probably Pike did not. I'd have to check the record, though.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions at this point from the board for the speakers? No, apparently not. Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Manno?
Yeah.
Just one, we're not a direct abutter to St. Patrick's either, as we are with Mr. Ricci's property. So
It's a
just
school
to clarify.
industrial zone that's within 100 yards of your property line.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else present wish to speak in opposition? Anybody at all? Mr. Stith, anybody on the Zoom side?
No one has raised their hand.
No, but thank you. All right. Yes, come up, please.
I'm George Haskell. Excuse me, George Haskell from Portsmouth on Leslie Drive. I've lived here all my life, as well as my father and his father. I see too many changes in Portsmouth, and if you have some homeowner that you want to build an extra 2 feet on your house or whatever, and it's outside the variance, that's one thing. But it involves a big business just deciding we should be sticking within what our ordinances are. And the only variation in the ordinance would be something like a small job or like this lady's generator. That may be outside the ordinance, but that's quite reasonable. But to make more money by building all this stuff, I just can't see it. And that's all I have to say about that. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in opposition? Last call for those in opposition, and again, we're clear on the Zoom side, okay? Last call for speakers, 2 for or against. Anybody wishes to state any position at all on the question before we close the public hearing and have a discussion? No. Call the speakers for just a second. Anybody? Any speakers from the audience? No? Seeing nobody? 2 for or against. Last call. Last call. Okay? Now, Mr. McDonald.
I just have a question about the Public Works Department and whether the Public Works Department has expressed any concerns.
Haven't gotten that far.
Not yet, not at the moment.
So we're going to expect the planning board will, and the TAC will deal with those?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Good. All right, we've closed the public hearing. Who wants to open the discussion? Anybody? Left, right, center? Round the barn? Ms. Rogerson, thank you.
Well, since nobody else is, I'm going to say I'm not going to be supporting this variance application. I am very sympathetic to the need for housing in the city. However, this is a very significant change in use, and I cannot think of two more incompatible uses in the city than residential and industrial. For largely the reasons that Mr. Major from Pike said, there were things that I had thought of before he spoke. Attorney Mulligan very candidly admitted that the property could be used the way that it is zoned, therefore, as industrial, therefore there is no hardship. And there is a concern to me that there would still continue to be industrial uses on the property with residential, a very significant residential apartment building in the back. So I cannot support this. I will say what I said during the public hearing. I think if there are opportunities for rezoning some of these industrial lands, that is something that should be dealt with broadly by the city council, by the planning board, to see whether or not those lands are suitable for that kind of use. I think given that this is in a heavily industrial zone, and there's been environmental issues with community campus, you have a very heavy industrial business next door in Pike Industries. I think that a more deliberative process should be given this application through a zoning amendment rather than through, I know it will go through TAC and planning board, but that would be with the purpose of citing this facility where it is, not looking to see whether or not this land is suitable for this use. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else with a general comment?
Yeah, I'll say a few
Mr. Mail?
words.
Yes, thank you.
Chris, John, I appreciate it. I understand what you're trying to do. Whether or not the variance to flip it from residential to, from industrial to industrial / commercial, which would be apartment buildings, considering the zoning on the rest of that stretch of Banfield has probably been varianced 3 or 4 times at least, considering St. Patrick's and the other residents down that road. But looking at it and taking in what the gentleman from Pike Industries says, because the residential use is at the very back of the property, which is closest to the residential use. I understand why it's there, because it's closer to the community campus, which is right in that corner. I get that. I don't know if you flipped it, it would be better received. Obviously, it might take Pike Industries objections out of the park. I'm not sure about that. But Banfield is becoming more residential, as obviously what's going on across the street, which is zoned differently. I get that, but sooner or later, depending on the DPW, there will probably be sidewalks down either side Banfield Road that go all the way to Ocean Avenue and don't stop. But given the way it's conceived right now, there are some issues. And you know that. Perhaps a different design, where the residential uses are closer to Banfield Road, and your use, your industrial use, is closer to Pike. Don't know if that would satisfy them, but that's what I'm looking at right now. You have an odd-shaped lot. I get that. Is everything on the other side of the Arnold property wetlands? Okay. Okay. That's my only thoughts right now.
Okay. Who's next? Ms. Eldridge?
I don't
Thank
know
you.
that this is very helpful, but Banfield Road is just such a mixed bag. I really don't see putting residential in there as a problem at all. I mean, you have a school, you have a new residential development, you have houses all up and down the stretch. But I really, really am having trouble seeing a hardship here, since it can be used for the other purposes very easily. And despite all good intentions and believing in the need for more housing, I don't see how I can do this under our guidelines. So that's where I am.
Thank you.
If someone can tell me differently, I will listen.
Mr. Lee?
Well, I'm conflicted too on this one. I hear the argument about residential, but then I look at the aerial photo here and I see two residences that directly abut the property. Across the street is a new residential development, and then abutting one of the residential developments is a school, St. Patrick's Academy, which we gave a variance for. So my wife, who's lived here much longer than I, remarked that this used to be sort of out in the boondocks, and it's really not anymore. It's becoming a little more mainstream. On the kind of the flip side of that, I recall a couple of years ago we had a not too dissimilar application to develop an apartment building in an industrial zone, which we denied the variance on that. So to be consistent, I think we probably should do the same thing here. But again, I'm conflicted by all the residential and the school in such close proximity to it. So I'm not sure I could go either way.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. For what it's worth, I agree with the tone of the comments that this is not an easy question. To my mind, this is very much it's an evolving a street in terms of its usage, which went for many decades with little or no change. Now we have a school, we have a new housing development across the street, as has been pointed out. The two residences on this side, which sort of straddle the property, have been there for a long time, long as I can remember anyway. So it's very much a mixed use district. We have as everyone knows, Pike Industries is very nearby. Right up the street on the other side of the road, there's a scout camp, Girl Scout camp, day camp. So that's another unusual use. So I guess my conclusion is if someone wants to develop this property and build put up a building with apartments, they do so at the risk that it will be a success. This is not a city project. So someone says that I think I can make a fair return on the property because there'll be enough demand for the apartments. So I'm willing to try to do that. I guess I support that general approach to things. So is it an ideal location? No. Will that perhaps encourage or require lower than average rents? I think the answer to that is probably yes, which everyone agrees, I think, is a positive thing. So, excuse me. So I guess after much thought and flipping a coin in my head, I can support this proposal. Is it ideal? No, but not very many proposals are, and it certainly will be a better use than what has been. We all know what it has been. That property has been used for a long time, which was not exactly a pretty sight. So I guess that's where I am on this. So, anybody else have any general comments? If not, I would. Mr. McDonald.
I have to say, I think we're seeing just the tip of this iceberg. When projects like this get built, there are going to be industrial uses at other places along Banfield Road. the traffic is going to increase, there are going to be trucks. There's going to be all kinds of things happening differently. People are going to want to make use of the wetlands and find out they can't because they're protected. So the whole project has got, I think, consequences that haven't appeared yet. But they're going to appear. And I think the planning board and TAC and ourselves have to reach some agreement about what is the best way to make that area of land usable to the most people in the city. And how do we do that? So this is one approach. And it's a description of how making more productive use of this land could be accomplished. It's going to be probably up to the planning board and TAC to understand whether the consequences of that use are going to be acceptable. And I don't think that's our job to decide.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd like to bounce it back to the planning board and the TAC.
Okay, yes, they will get their shot. That's for sure. Is there any other general comments? If not, I'd like to invite a motion from somebody.
Mr. Chair, can I make a suggestion that you address the
Where-
variances separately?
Come up, please.
I'm sorry.
To vote, do we agree to let, one more comment? Any objection?
No.
Because we closed the public hearing.
Yeah, I apologize. I
No,
probably should
that's
have raised
all
this
right.
earlier.
All right, we all agreed. Yes,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Would you entertain at least thinking about voting on the variances separately and not as a package?
Yes, certainly, that's reasonable, yes.
Thank you.
We do that quite often.
I have,
Mr. Lee?
I have a question. There's, the two applications are for setback relief and then the zoning relief, so I don't understand the,
Well, so we've got a dimensional variance for setback relief and then a use variance for residential use. They're two separate.
I hear what you're saying, but if you don't get one, would that mean?
Well, if you
At least
grant
it's
us the
something to go to
setback
the
relief,
planning
we
board
can
with. I get it.
we can use it.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Yeah, for different buildings, yep. Okay. All right. Does someone have yes, that seems a reasonable sort of request. We will take the variances separately, and the first variance we'll vote on when someone makes a motion is from section 10.5 to 1 to allow a 45-foot front yard where 70 feet is required. In other words, 45 feet off Banfield Road. So, does someone have a motion with respect to that only, the 45-foot front yard setback request?
Question for staff?
Sir?
Peter, is the setback requirement part of the industrial zone?
Yes, it's a requirement in the industrial zone for the front yard.
Okay. Does it make a difference whether that setback is for the building as it's laid out now or a future residential building?
Well, it would be for
For what's proposed right now?
proposed,
Okay.
for what's before you.
Thank you.
That commercial building, yep.
Okay. And does anyone have a motion with respect to the 45-foot front setback only, as presented in the application? Anybody? Yep. Mr. Lee? Yep.
I'd move to approve that application as presented and advertised.
For that variance, the first.
For the 45-foot
Thank you.
variance.
Is there a second to that motion, a positive motion to approve the 45-foot setback?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ms. Eldridge. Mr. Lee, your motion, please.
Okay, well, just taking the first two criteria together, this variance is not contrary to the public interest in the spirit of ordinance as observed. This use doesn't conflict with any implicit purpose of the ordinance, and because there's other residential houses in the immediate neighborhood, as two of them are direct abutters, as well as across the street, I don't think that would alter the essential character of the neighborhood in any way or threaten any public health, safety rights. I think the substantial justice is done because the benefit to the applicant is not outweighed by any gain to the general public or anybody else. I certainly don't see that diminishing the value of the surrounding properties in any way. And then literal enforcement of this ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. The unnecessary hardship in this case would be that because of the topography of the land and the geology, the wetlands and all that sort of thing, the buffer is necessary to limit the pervious materials used and make it a little more environmentally friendly along those lines. So for those reasons, I would move that we approve this application as presented and advertised.
Thank you. Your second. Ms. Eldridge, right?
Well, the setback's currently 34 feet, and now it's going to be 45, so it's actually becoming more conforming, so I support this.
Okay, thank you. All right, the motion has been made and seconded. Any further comments? If not, we'll take a vote. This is on variance number 1 only. I'll start down at the left-hand side here. Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. It passes. Okay, that was variance number 1. Okay. And just let me make a note here. Okay. So that leaves us as our next piece of business to vote on variance number 2, which is the use variance for the 60-unit residential building, where residential buildings are not allowed in the industrial zone. Does someone have a motion with respect to this variance request, please?
I will.
Mr. Lee, thank you.
But to keep that ball rolling, I would move that we approve the variance from section 10.440 to allow the 60-unit residential neighborhood where residential uses are not permitted in industrial district.
Okay, thank you.
I might.
Is there a second to that motion? Is there a second? Anybody second?
I will certainly second, at least for purposes of discussion
Thank-
and
thank you, Ms.
for
Eldridge.
contemplation.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lee?
All right, so again, the first two requirements together, the variance isn't contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. I think in this case, although the property is technically zoned industrial, it's pretty clearly, in my mind, in a transitional zone in that, first of all, there's residences directly abut this. We've built a large school education building next door to it as well. And across the street, there's a new residential development. So to me, that pretty well cements in my mind that this industrial area is becoming a transitional area to sort of a mixed use. The substantial justice portion, I think the benefit to the applicant is not outweighed by any harm to the general public. I think there's a gain to the general public in that we would be able, through the applicant's efforts, to add some modestly priced housing stock to the area, which we so desperately need. And also, that would also tie in with the value of surrounding properties are not diminished. I think having some modestly priced apartments there would certainly be an asset to that end of the town in general, and also, again, sort of buttress the fact that, again, this is seeming to be a transitional area from really seriously rural to a mixed-use area. And as far as the hardship, the literal enforcement of this ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. Here, because of, again, special conditions that distinguish this from other properties in the area, I think the use is reasonable here, and that the fact that we're looking to put some residences up in the back rear portion of the property, which will be away from the commercial use on Banfield Road, but still directly abutting the residential property there to the left of it. I just really don't see any fair and substantial relationship between the general purposes of the ordinance and the specific application that provision to this property, and I think this proposed use is a reasonable one. So for those reasons, I would move that we approve this application as presented and advertised.
Thank you. Ms. Eldridge? No?
I have nothing to
Nothing
add, but
to
I
add?
think he
All
was
right.
quite persuasive. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And, yes,
Comment, just if
Yes.
the motion maker would entertain the stipulation in the staff report that the building design, including size and scale, location, and site layout, may change, subject to review and approval by the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board.
I would agree with that.
second agrees as well, thank you. Okay. Anything further on the motion, on this motion? Okay. All right, I'm going to call for the vote. The vote is to approve. Ms. Eldridge?
Yes,
Yes, thank you.
yes.
Ms. Margerson?
No.
No? Okay. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Mantle?
No.
Okay, and I vote yes, so the 4-2, so the motion is passed. All right. Yeah, you're welcome. All right. All right. Turning the page to item C on the agenda, which is the request of 2422 Lafayette Road Associates, LLC.
One before that.
I'm sorry, what?
There's one before that.
Oh,
Item B.
did I?
Yeah, 219.
Oh, sorry, jumping, getting ahead of myself there, thank you.
Too efficient.
So, yeah. The correct one, item B, reads as follows. The request of Thomas Hammer, applicant for property located at 219 Sagamore Avenue, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing garage and deck and construct a new garage and driveway, which requires the following. One, a variance from section 10.521 to allow 30.5% building coverage, where 25% is the maximum allowed. 2, a variance from section 10.573.20 to allow a 2.5-foot rear yard where 15 feet is required. 3, a variance from section 10.571 to allow an accessory structure to be located closer to a street than the principal structure. And 4, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 221 as Lot 19 and lies within the General Residence A, GRA District. Who presents this case, please? Anybody? No? No takers? 219 Sagamore Ave, last call.
I think he's on the Zoom call.
Peter, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
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 Peter, can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, great. I'm sorry, I had it muted. Thank you so much for taking the time to review our project here. As we've stated in our documents, we are attempting to demolish the existing garage, which is basically in disrepair. I'm not sure when it was built, but our intent is to try to make the property less non-conforming. It is a very tight lot. Hold on one second here. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Let me see if I can move that. Okay, because I can still see you. Our intent is to move the garage slightly away from the property line and away from the setback on the side setback, and to improve the use of the garage by allowing by moving the garage doors from the right-hand side as you approach the garage to the left-hand side. And in doing so, we would remove some of the paving that is currently used for ancillary parking in the backyard and kind of reroute the way that the property is, that garage is accessed. In doing so, we're removing that deck and adding a smaller deck at the back, basically for access. And then the other intent was there's a bulkhead that was used. It had a roof and a structure over it, and used that as the access point to the house and create a little mudroom. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the property, but the garage is in pretty sad shape, and it really needs to be removed. So in doing so, I did blow up some of the stuff from the engineer about building coverage. We made an attempt to improve the 35% coverage down slightly, and we've also worked to try to improve the reducing non-pervious conditions on the property. With that being said, as we go through the variance criteria, do you have any questions at this point in the process?
No, please continue.
Okay. So with that said, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Our comment to that is that basically replacing and repairing a rotting structure would serve the public interest and provide a safe and stable building, and it would have a greater visual appeal as well. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. As I stated, we are trying to move the garage further away from the property line and the side setback, creating a greater distance and in the rear and the side is in spirit with the ordinance. And we're, as I stated, we are reducing the building coverage and increasing the open space, again, within the spirit of the ordinance. Substantial justice will be done. Allowing this variance request will create a safer environment for the community, and there's no harm to any of our abutters. And it would also allow us to use the property as intended when we purchased the property back in July. Little enforcement, values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. This clearly would be the case as the structure is in pretty bad shape. There's also a chimney on the back of the property which will be removed and not replaced. I don't know what they had used the property, that part of it was, I think there was some kind of a heating unit in there. So that would be removed as well. But this would definitely improve the value of not only our property, but the surrounding properties. And then the last one would be little enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. The purpose of our redoing this garage is to use the garage as its intended use, and it was built at some point in time on a non-conforming lot, and so therefore to rebuild the structure as to take the structure and move it and rebuild it would help the community, and it also would, if we couldn't do it, it would be a hardship that we could not utilize this building as its intended use. Any questions?
Any questions from the board at this point? No? Apparently not. Is there anybody present or on Zoom who wishes to speak in support? Anybody at all? No? Anybody in opposition? Remotely or in person? No? Last call, 2 for or against. Any speakers at all? With any perspective? Anybody at all? No? Apparently all clear on Zoom, Mr. Stith? Yeah? Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Okay. What's your We've heard the proposal. Board, does anyone have a general comment to start the process here?
I'll make a motion.
All right, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the application as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Mantle. Anybody with a second? Thank you, Ms. Margison. Your motion, Mr. Mantle.
To the 5 criteria, I don't believe granting the variances would be contrary to the public interest. The spirit of the ordinance would be observed. Substantial justice is done. He is trying to make a non-conforming property less non-conforming, granted by 1.5 feet, and the building coverage doesn't change. And we no longer have a garage that's falling down. We'll have a newly built one. The values of the surrounding property are not diminished. In fact, they'll probably improve. And literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship, which I believe to be true. For those reasons, I made the motion to approve.
Thank you. Ms. Margison?
So I will support the motion, obviously. Just a couple of things in support. The building coverage is 30.5, which is obviously over 25% maximum in the zoning district. However, that is just carrying forward a pre-existing non-conforming building coverage. The rear yard setback is slightly improved. I think that, you know, the intent of these ordinance provisions are for movement of air and light, and that there is nothing about approving this variance that will impinge on that at all. And I think that is it.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion before we take a vote, which is on a motion to approve? Anybody at all? No? Okay. I'll call for the vote in that case. The motion is to approve. Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. You're approved, Mr. Hammer. Is he there?
He is, but I muted him.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
No,
Can you hear me?
no objections will be entertained.
Thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome.
All right, thank you, Peter, for your time.
He had a meeting.
That was good.
We get no
All
respect.
right. Now turning the page. Item C, the request of 2422 Lafayette Road, Associates LLC owner for property located at 2454 Lafayette Road, Unit 5, whereas relief is needed for a proposed veterinary urgent care clinic, which requires the following. 1, a special exception from Section 10.440, use number 7.50, to allow a veterinary care clinic use where the use is allowed by special exception. Said property is located on Assessor Map 273 as Lot 3-5 and lies within the Gateway Corridor G1 District. Who presents this case to the board, please?
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Nicholas Collins, 18 Lenox Street, Beverly, Mass., and I'm with Olson Lewis Architects, representing Rare Breed Veterinary Partners, who are seeking a special exception to operate a veterinary urgent care facility at 2454 Lafayette Road, Unit 5. So, like human urgent care facilities, veterinary urgent care seeks to fill the gap where a regular veterinary care might fall short. So if your dog or your cat is sick on the off hours, they're not quite sick enough to bring into an emergency room, but they do require medical attention. Urgent care facilities exist for them to bring in their animal, have them checked out, and properly attended to by a medical professional. So the facility will be 3,670 square feet. It will have an entryway, vestibule, lobby reception area, a 5 to 6 exam rooms, and a public use restroom or client use restroom And then the remainder of the space will be for staff only, which will include a treatment area, a pharmacy lab area, surgery pack, an x-ray room, animal holding space for animal recovery and observation, and then a veterinary office, a break room for staff, a staff-only restroom, and then a utility space. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 2 o'clock to 11 p.m., and Saturday and Sunday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And as you can see, the site is located at the end of a commercial retail establishment. It's on the end unit. The interior, if there is, I think there was a floor plan included on this, if you don't mind. Oh, there it is. So this is a basis of design floor plan. We would apply this to the actual space itself. It's roughly the same size, although some modifications will be needed. But you can see this is the general idea of how that space would be laid out and how people would operate moving through that space. Regarding compliances with the special exception standards, standards provided by this ordinance will be met. The proposed vet urgent care clinic will meet all the standards required by the City of Portsmouth. And there is a provision for in the ordinance regarding veterinary facilities with kennels. This urgent care facility will not have kennels. Kennels defined by the city ordinance are an establishment in which the primary use is housing dog, cats, or other household pets. We have holding areas defined on our floor plan, but they are for short-term recovery purposes only. There'll be no long-term. There will be no overnight animals being held in that location. So they're really just there for animals to recover post-surgery or for those that are ill and require observation. There's no hazard to public or adjacent properties. The veterinary urgent care will comply with all state design requirements, including the medical gas system. The X-ray room will comply with the New Hampshire rules of control for radiation, and the pharmacy, all medication control will be under lock and key with staff only having access to those areas. There will be no detriment to property values in the vicinity or change of the essential characteristics. The area is a retail area. It's intended for that use. We were going to fit right in with the use of the building. And really for the interior space, our goal is to isolate the animals from the exterior as much as isolating any noises that might come out. So animals coming in want to be quiet and safe and happy. So sound control is as much a concern for neighbors as much for the animals that are going to be within the space itself. There's no creation of a traffic or safety hazard. We are actually reducing the number of required parking spaces. According to the ordinance, there are required 8 off-street parking spaces, 1 per 500 square feet for veterinary care facilities, as opposed to the current 13 spaces required for retail trade use. And then there will be no excessive demand on municipal services. The existing site meets the requirements for this facility. And lastly, there's no significant increase for stormwater or runoff, as everything that we're proposing is interior work only. We're proposing no exterior work at all. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker at this point? No? Apparently not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else present or via Zoom who wishes to speak in support of this? Anybody in favor? No? Mr. Stith? No? Okay. And nobody in the audience? Okay. Anybody in opposition? Anybody present or on Zoom who wishes to speak in opposition? No? Apparently not. Okay. Last call for speakers. 2 for or against. Any comments from anybody? Apparently. Okay. The public hearing is closed in that case. And we have a request for a special exception. We haven't had one of those in a while.
We got one coming up.
Yeah, there's another one.
Except, yeah. Anybody have a motion, perhaps? Anybody have a motion?
Mr. Parrott. I will move to approve the special exception as presented and advertised. And if I get a second, I'll tell why.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Lee, thank you. Ms. Margison?
Okay, so, special exception is that if the applicant meets all of the special exception criteria, the zoning board is in some ways compelled to grant it. So going through those special exception criteria, as was just done by the applicant, the standards as provided by this ordinance for the particular use permitted by special exception are met in that this is a veterinary care clinic, which is allowed by special exception in this zoning area. There is, pursuant to 10.232.22, there will be no hazard to the public or adjacent property on account of potential fire, explosion, or release of toxic materials. There will be no toxic materials on this facility, and as presented in the applicant's application, the medical gas, X-rays, and medication will all be in compliance with state rules, state laws. There is no detriment to property values in the vicinity or change in the essential characteristics of any area, including residential neighborhoods or business and industrial districts, on account of the location or scale of the buildings and other structures, parking areas, access ways, odor, smoke, gas, dust, or other pollutant, noise, glare, heat, vibration, or unsightly outdoor storage of equipment, vehicles, or other materials. There is no change in the essential characteristics of this very business area. This is a strip mall. There's actually a pet store at the other end of this mall, and there is nothing that will create any kind of those nuisances for the abutting property owners. This is not a residential area. And there is no creation of a traffic safety hazard or a substantial increase in level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. As indicated by the applicant, they are only required to provide a total of 8 off-street parking spaces for every 500-foot use, and they are going to be doing that. And there is also the times that this will be operating, there'll be less use in that mall, in that strip mall. And there will be no excessive demands on municipal services, including but not limited to water, sewer, waste disposal, police and fire protection, and schools. There's nothing about this business that would implicate any of those things unless the animals are not any good. And there'll be no significant increase of stormwater runoff onto the adjacent property or streets. This is just an interior build-out of an existing storefront, and therefore the applicant has met this criteria as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lee, I think you had the second, didn't you?
I do, and I concur with Ms. Margison's comments, and nothing to add.
Thank you. Anything further on the motion before we take the vote? Apparently not. Those in favor of the motion, which is positive, to approve it? Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay. You're approved. Yep, you're welcome.
I know.
That's for sure.
That's a really long special exception.
The competition.
Okay, there we go.
Different market,
Yeah.
different target.
Yeah.
Or
Oh.
pets.
What a crazy coincidence. Okay.
Can we just say ditto?
We just did it. Well, there's a quota.
above.
That's it. We got the quota.
Seems to be a run of one.
And please, as always, I say, please correct my pronunciation if I mangle names. The request of Nicole Gusta, applicant for Property Mall LLC owner for property located at 650 Islington Street, Unit C, whereas relief is needed for a proposed veterinary care clinic, which requires the following. 1, a special exception from Section 10.440, use number 7.50, to allow a veterinary care use where the use is allowed by special exception. Said property is located on Assessor Map 155, Lot 5-C1, and lies within the Character District 4W, CD4W. and the Historic District. Who speaks in favor, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Tim Phoenix from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts here in Portsmouth, here with and on behalf of Nicole Giusto. You got it close, Mr. Perry.
Thank you.
Yes, it is somewhat unusual. You mentioned yourself that it's unusual to have a special exception. Now you've got two of them and two vets. They are different target markets. That's urgent care. Nicole is just a regular veterinarian. Peter's got the plan up on the site. You'll see the building highlighted in yellow. This is part of the old Frank Jones condominium redevelopment. It's right across the parking lot from the CVS parking lot. She's running the entire first floor, or intends to, which is 2,650 square feet. She's going to have 3 employees other than herself. Inside is going to be 3 examination rooms where she'd meet with pets and family, a surgery suite, a treatment room where they take the pet back and treat the pet with the family gone or waiting outside of that room, and an x-ray room. As she says, by the way, Nicole filed this herself. I agreed to present it for her. I think she's done a good job. I told her I don't think I could do any better myself, so I'm just going to go through her memorandum. The purpose is to care for the health of the local pet population in an easily accessible and walkable in-town location. Nicole herself lives on Middle Street and will be intending to walk to work. It's mentioned a little later, but her use requires 6 parking spaces. 4 of them will be identified with signage for customers, and there will be 2 others, and there's plenty of parking on the site anyway. I'll get to it in a minute where the parking is going to be. She's discussed it with the building owner. She's discussed it and received approval of the condominium association. So turning to the special exception requirements, 10.232.21 is the standards as provided by the ordinance for the particular use. And as you read, this use is permitted by special exception. As I mentioned, there's going to be 1 doctor, and it's a small animal veterinary clinic. Patients and their owners during regular business hours, 8 to 6. There's no kennel. There's no overnight hospitalization. There's no training, grooming, or sale. There's no kennel services, and that was mentioned in the last one. And there's no exterior additions or changes planned to the building. The only change exterior-wise is going to be the signage that I mentioned, the parking signage. The second requirement is no hazard to the public or adjacent property on account of potential fire, explosion, or release of toxic chemicals. It's a vet, so there aren't going to be any. It's already been an office building. The last office renter there required 10 parking spaces. Her use only requires 6. 10.232.23, there's no detriment to property values in the vicinity or change in the essential characteristics of any area, including residential neighborhoods or business and industrial districts on account of the location and scale of the buildings, which isn't changing, and other structures, parking areas, which isn't changing, access ways, odor, smoke, gas, dust, or other pollutant, noise, glare, heat, vibration, or unsightly outdoor storage of equipment, vehicles, or other materials. None of those will exist. All of the services are going to be indoors during regular business hours. There's no detriment to surrounding property values. Again, it's been an office for many, many years and will continue as such just as a veterinary services, and it was, I believe, an engineering firm. No creation of a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic or congestion in the vicinity. Again, the intention is to be as much as possible a walkable area. If you've walked around Portsmouth or driven around Portsmouth almost any time, but particularly early mornings, in good or bad weather, you see dozens of pets walking their owners. It's just not going to create a traffic problem. There's plenty of parking on site for anybody who visits. And many, we believe, will walk to the vicinity. What else does she say? As I mentioned, adequate parking to accommodate 3 patient visits at a time, which is all she can handle. The centrality of the location allows clients to walk from their homes, which will have the effect of decreasing traffic. It will promote the business CD4W district, provide a needed service downtown, which we don't have presently, to my knowledge. As I mentioned, we need 6 parking spaces where the engineering firm required 10, so there's a little reduction in the need there. Next, section 10.232.25, there's no excessive demand on municipal services including but not limited to water, sewer, waste disposal, police, and fire protection. Again, this will be no different than any other office-type use that's been permitted there and has operated there. And then finally, no significant increase of stormwater runoff onto adjacent property or streets. There will be no change because the building's not changing. Peter, if you can go to the last page of the narrative, there's a little chart that we got from the Condominium Association. I just want to point, there you go. I don't know if you can enlarge that, but you can see the yellow building, and you see up on top of it, there's 17 spaces. Her spaces, assigned spaces, are either going to go there or on the strip of spaces down at the bottom. The entry to the building is on the right as you're facing that. So whether her spaces are assigned on the 17 or the 12, they're right outside the building. That's all I have. It's pretty straightforward. I almost came up here and said, I repeat what the guy before me said and Ms. Margison's motion, but I decided I'd better create a record and go through it.
Any questions for Mr. Phoenix at this point? No? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else present who'd like to speak in favor? Anyone else in favor? Mr. Stith, how about the Zoom side? No? Okay. Anyone in opposition? Does anyone present wish to speak in opposition? In opposition, last call. Last call of all speakers, 2 for or against. Anybody at all? Anybody? No? Clear on the Zoom side? Okay, fine. The public hearing is closed. We've heard the proposal. Board, is there anybody wish to start the conversation?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to grant the special exception as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Mantle. Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Eldridge, yes, thank you. Mr. Mantle, your motion, please.
Going through the special exception criteria after we've been trained. Standards as provided by this ordinance for the particular use permitted by special exception. No hazard to the public or adjacent property on account of potential fire, explosion, or release of toxic materials. No detriment to property values in the vicinity or change in the essential characteristics of any area, including residential neighborhoods or businesses and industrial districts, on account of location or scale of buildings and other structures, parking areas, accessways, odor, smoke, gas, dust, and other pollutants, noise, glare, heat, vibration, or unsightly outdoor storage of equipment, vehicles, and other materials. No creation of a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. No excessive demands on municipal services, including but not limited to water, sewer, waste disposal, police, and fire protection in schools. And finally, no significant increase in stormwater runoff onto adjacent property or streets. Considering there used to be exactly what you're proposing just further down the street on the other side, I support this application.
Thank you. Ms. Eldridge? No?
I have nothing to add.
Thank you.
Good job.
Any final thoughts? Final thoughts before we have the vote? No? Okay. The motion is to approve. Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margison? Mr.
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle? And I
Yes.
vote, and the chair votes yes as well. You're approved.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Something else.
Okay, we're hard up on our traditional 9 o'clock break. 5 minutes, no more than 10.
Okay.
Okay?
You're tough.
We stand in recess.
It's the same coverage,
We get these fabulous
26.5.
iPads and I still have too much paper.
Well, no,
Welcome
it's
back,
more.
everybody. We're back in session.
23, I'm sorry.
We're up on item E under new business, and that reads as follows. The request of Thomas and Lindsay Vickery, owners, for property located at 37 Orchard Street, whereas relief is needed for a proposed addition which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow 26.5% building coverage where 25% is the maximum allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 149 as Lot 9 and lies within the General Residence A, GRA District. Who presents this to the board, please?
Good evening. I'm Amy Dutton. I work out of Kittery and live in Portsmouth. Tonight, I just want to introduce you to, this is Tom and Lindsay Vickery. Just a little background on the house and the family. They live at 37 Orchard. I call them four squares. That has a little addition off to the right side where the driveway side that is was poorly built, and that is going to be removed, and then the addition will encapsulate that square footage and then expand 9 feet 6 inches towards the driveway. There is an existing back, we'll be kind and call it a deck, kind of a roofed deck that is also in disrepair. That's going to just stay, the roof line is going to stay, footings are going to stay, and we'll just winterize it and make that be the mudroom. And so the kitchen will expand the 9 feet 6 inches from the existing, and then we'll take it as a second floor to create a primary bedroom, bathroom, suite. So it'll go from 1.5 bathrooms to 2.5 bathrooms, and the bedroom count will stay 3, I believe, 3 in an office. So I'm not sure if I have a whole lot more to add from the description of what we're doing. Long and short of it is, though, we're just matching the back elevation roof line and bringing that around to the side elevation roof line, which will stay underneath the existing ridge. So without further ado, I'll go through the 5 criteria. The new structure will stay within the character of the neighborhood. It's a sweet block, kind of sandwiched in between 2 also kind of quiet streets where Wyberg can be a little bit busier. And it's a real mix of New Englanders, Capes, multifamily, single family, and it kind of just blends right in there. And if anything, the neighbor to the right has sent a letter of support. That is the neighbor that will be most impacted. And they've already done, it looks like, a good amount of work to the house, and it looks like they're going to be doing more as well. It would not impact the safety of the neighborhood or the health of the neighborhood or neighbors. Substantial justice will be done. The surrounding properties will not be diminished. There's a few houses on the block that are under construction right now, so I'm thinking that it's just everybody's kind of upping everybody's property value. It's all really good, solid work that's been done. And literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. The lot itself is, as you can see, angled, and it's probably easier to see from the city map that the house to the left, which is 2-family, their driveway is actually on the Vickery's property, or no, it's kind of like, do you really even know? If we had a survey, we would know, but their driveway is about 3 feet from their window on the left side. So It's a well-used property. It is non-conforming, but this is a young family with 2 small children and trying to stay in Portsmouth and create a viable lifestyle for themselves. So, do you have any questions?
Any questions from the board at this point? No? Apparently not.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's a great house.
Anyone present who'd like to speak in favor? Anyone else speaking in favor? Anyone else speaking in opposition? Mr. Stith, how are we looking on Zoom?
No one has
No,
raised their hand.
no one raised their hands, okay. Last call, 2 for or against. Any speakers at all? Any speakers? Last call? No? Okay. We've heard the proposal. Board,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mantle.
I move to make a motion to accept the application as presented.
All right, thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Second? Phil's beat you out by a heartbeat. Okay, thank you. Mr. Manley, your motion, please.
Going to the 5 criteria, the variance is not contrary to the public interest at all. The spirit of the ordinance is definitely observed. Substantial justice is done. There is no value of surrounding properties to be diminished, and literal enforcement of the ordinance would be an unnecessary hardship. It's a application to make a 1.5% building coverage, which is small for the improvement of the property, and that's why I made the motion to grant.
Thank you. Ms. Eldridge?
I agree with everything, and it is a small lot, much smaller than the zoning would allow, and any change to the building, I think, would increase the coverage.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Pretty straightforward? Okay. I want to call the roll. We'll vote on the motion, which is to approve as presented. Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. 6-0. You're approved. You're all set. Yep. You're welcome. Okay.
Okay, so this is just a new.
Just has to come back to us.
Next up is
Yeah, really.
item F on the agenda, which is the request of London Bridge South Inc., owner, for the property located at 114 Saratoga Way, whereas relief is needed to amend a previously approved application to merge 2 lots and demo existing structures in order to construct a 4-unit multifamily dwelling, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow a lot area per dwelling unit of 3,736 square feet, where 5,000 square feet is the minimum required. And 2, a special exception from section 10.440, use number 1.51, to allow 4 dwelling units where the use is allowed by a special exception. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 212 as Lot 112 and lies within the General Residence B District. Who presents this project, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify that this is, the reason we are rehearing this is purely because the designs were changed.
Correct.
Okay, so this is not starting from 0.
Correct.
Okay.
You just
Yes, thank you, Ms.
just said my
Martin.
opening statement,
Oh,
Ms. Martin.
sorry.
So, yes, the key word here is amend. We're amending a previously granted variance and special exception. And the variance, as was read, was a variance from 521 to allow lot areas of 3736 square feet where 5,000 is the minimum. That's the same. And a special exception from 10440 to allow 4 dwelling units where the use is allowed by special exception. That's not changing. The history of this is that my client purchased the property. It was originally approved for this relief in roughly July of 2020. I did not represent the applicant at the time. My client bought the property, submitted building plans, building permit application and construction level plans in early December of 2021, and then went forward with a lot of stuff like buying the windows and what have you. They've poured the foundation, et cetera, in reliance upon that being approved. Once it was approved a month or so ago, or reviewed by the staff, it was determined that some of the physical changes to the building, not really to the lot, with one exception, were a little too far to do administratively, so they said come back. So we're not asking for any variance. We're not asking for any special exception. We're asking you to approve the amendments to the site plan. I know you have them. Peter's got them up on the plan. I'm going to use this easel here because the distance in his plan set from this image to our image is many, many pages, so I thought it might be easier to do this. This before you and up on the up there, that's what we're proposing, I think. No, that's the old proposal. That's the old proposal. And I've highlighted here, oh. The easiest thing to do might be, I've got each of the plans I'm going to look at here, one for each of you. Thanks, Paul.
Yep.
So I'm handing out what's before you here, and while he's doing that, I'll tap dance or something.
Would you just give us, let's just take a minute so we can all have a chance and
Yeah.
and look and listen to you at the same time. Because this is obviously an unusual procedure for us.
Yeah, it's a little unusual. I just thought it was easier than Peter having to slide through a bunch of different pages to get to the comparison. I should have had them compared when we submitted. But if you're looking at that, the first page is what was approved back in 2020. And on here, I've highlighted the areas of the building that are changing. So you can see this area here I've highlighted. This was as approved. This area here, these corners of this dormer. This area, which is the distance of this dormer wall above the first floor property edge. There's this area here, which doesn't have a dormer, and will in a minute. And then you'll see the other feature is this gambrel roof that has a little curve to it. And the second page is what. Oh, and up here there were skylights proposed on both sides of the building. So. By the way, I'm here with the owner's representative, Joel Asadorian, who's in charge of the construction project. So a little different orientation, but so I've put the little squares here on this empty side where there are going to be no skylights. That's going to be just a plain roof now. Down below, there's going to be, in place of the skylights, oh, sorry, thank you. Thank you. In place of the skylights is this little, what I'll call an eyebrow dormer, and then you can see this is a dormer from a side view, and then you can see that the gambrel roof has been straightened out for constructability. And then this little dot right here, the wall has been brought forward so it's more close to the bottom wall, and then this dormer has been stretched a little bit to go closer to the building edge. And all of those are for some form of constructability issue, either a little cost savings or to create a little bit more room for access. Joel can go into details if you want. How do I do this? On the other side, I didn't give you a copy of these, but this is the site plan as approved 2 years ago. And the second page that I'm going to show you, just because it's really easy to follow, is Alex Ross's plan today. So from a site plan perspective, the only real changes are, I don't know if you can see this line. I tried to do it in purple, but I brought a nearly empty highlighter. There's a fence going up here. There's a fence already here, so we're constructing a fence here and down here. There's an electrical box that was off-site and has now been moved on-site. There's a telephone pole here that's got some problems and they're going to fix, and there's some underground stuff. But really, all we're really talking about is for asking for you to approve or amend is the site plan and the elevations and floor plans with those minor changes that I've mentioned on this other side. So again, from this, with a shorter dormer this way, further up the roof with skylights and a curved roof and no eyebrow dormer, to this, which is very similar. There's some other minor treatments, window treatments and what have you, but here it got a little wider, on that side wider, skylights missing, wall came down to get it closer to the front wall, and this eyebrow, what I call an eyebrow dormer, here it is from the side, and then the gambrel, instead of being curved at the bottom, it's straight. We thought those were insignificant, but the staff thought it was significant enough to have you guys review it again. I did not, as you notice in my submission, go through why we meet the requirements for the variance and the special exception. I just listed them, and that is because they were already done 2 years ago, approved. I've given you the minutes and the notice of decision, and in that respect, it hasn't changed at all. I don't know if there's anything Joel wants to add, unless you have questions. That's my submission.
I guess for my part, I would like a brief explanation as to why the changes were made.
No, I do not.
I know you alluded to some in general terms, but
Joel Isidorian, I'm the construction supervisor for London Bridge South.
Thank you.
Originally, we didn't know that changes weren't allowed originally. We made the submission in December. We didn't think that there was a problem in most senses. We get a variance for that, and there isn't such scrutiny on the building. If there are any changes, they're usually handed through administrative, dealt with through administration. There are a couple things that, so when we got the design originally, it was not, didn't actually have dimensions on it. I think it was presented more of a drawing, right? So then when we took it to the architect, he mentioned some making rooms less than 10 feet wide, based on, extending out this. And so it's only got a 1 foot, 1 foot depth to it instead of having the I think it had 2.5, maybe 3 foot depth to it. The dormers on the back, we wanted to make use of space without skylights in general. Over the years, 25 years of building, skylight always smokes. It always turns into some kind of issue at some point. We wanted to give those center units some light. The original submission actually had 2 dormers. The original submission had 2 dormers right here that actually went towards the older portion of the neighborhood. And, through review, after talking to staff, they said, well, this looks a little bit ominous over here, so we brought it back to the original state, other than we just kind of squared it all off a little bit more, just for structural purposes, instead of having major beams sticking through ceilings, things along those lines. It just made sense. And it's usually something, again, pretty common that we do when we have a drawing. We're going to stay within the footprint and work our way through it. The fence, there is an existing fence there already. One of the abutters actually had said that the previous owner to us had told her that he would put a fence up over there. It never ended on the plan. So we figured, hey, this is a good time. We're here right now. That was something I believe they were going to do through administrative action, but we're here, right? So I thought it made sense to just add it to the plan with you guys involved. Bring the fence all the way to the edge. I think that makes sense too. And then as far as the electrical lines go, it turned out that they didn't have an easement on the other side of the road to put the transformer box. So they brought it over to our side. Most of that wasn't done through me. That the utility company was requirements through them. That's the general stuff that we were dealing with, yeah.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. Any questions from the board? Ms. Marges? No?
Oh, so was the staff person who told you you had to come back sitting up here on the dais with us? Just kidding.
I'm not going to throw Peter under the bus. I'm going to say it was a joint staff decision. It might have been the messenger. It might have been
For what
the
it's
messenger
worth,
for
I
this.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree with the staff. Okay, thank you, that was helpful, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for me?
Anybody else? Mr. Mantle?
It seems like if this was the original, it seems like, now, you weren't part of it, so I get it. It seems like you were trying to copy the design that was already in Atlantic Heights.
Yeah.
And after you went through the planning board and everybody else are like, no, we don't want a copy of Atlantic Heights.
Well,
Which I find kind of interesting.
In reading, I've read the minutes of, which are in the packet of the previous submission, and there was some discussion in the minutes of how it fit in with Atlantic Heights. This is in an area that's right behind it is the typical brick Atlantic Heights buildings,
Yeah.
some of which are single family, some are duplex. But right like half a block away is like a wood frame condo structure, two-family.
Townhouses.
Yeah, townhouses.
Albacore
Thank
Way.
you, townhouses. So the decision of the board at that time was that it wasn't exact, but it was the way it was designed was a nice fit for the area. And what Joel and his people have tried to do is recognize that and make some changes that made it more livable, more constructible, but not do away with the entire approval, with the gambrel roof and whatnot.
Okay. No, I was just curious because, like I said, the very first design looks like one of the Atlantic Heights duplexes on steroids. Basically, it's a 4-unit as opposed to a duplex, and
Energy drink, not steroids.
the new one is not so much. And yeah, I know the property very well. I drove it today. I've driven it 3-4 years ago because one of your abutters on Saratoga Way is very well known to the city attorney.
Okay, thank you.
Any other
Anybody, any last call, anybody question, any more from the board? No? Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Anybody else in favor? Anybody else? Anything on Zoom, Mr.?
No one has raised their hand.
No, okay.
Oh, wait, we do have one.
We did,
Steve McGrath.
See,
Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, I'm sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
yes.
He sounds like the other guy.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for this hearing. My name is Steve McGrath. I live at 185 Raleigh Way, and I appreciate the board member who just mentioned that he drove the neighborhood and understands what it's like. So I'm at 185 Raleigh Way, as I mentioned. That's half a house. It's in the back. My backyard abuts this proposed development that's underway, Lot 103, Map 212. I've only owned the home a year or so I wasn't here to speak to the original variance. And I admit I couldn't really see all the drawings that were going on in the room there on Zoom, but it looks like the eyebrow dormer is facing the south side, the Atlantic Point side, not the Atlantic Heights side. And it looks like there's a little more massing on my side. And this building is 15 feet from my back fence, and I don't have much room between my place and the back fence, so you can understand why I'm concerned with what's going on. So I support the variance with conditions regarding the roof line and some utility infrastructure. So on the roof line, it's 3 stories in a neighborhood of 2 stories, 2-story brick buildings, hundreds of them. And although it's in line, I suppose, with Atlantic Point, the 3-story townhouses that were mentioned, it's a little bit big with respect to the 2-story Atlantic Heights homes. So it's a lot, and it's close, and the square off, from what I could tell on Zoom, makes it even a little more imposing. So the other thing that, by my count, is 13 feet higher than the 2-story homes around it. So there are implications here for the essential character of the community and the property value of myself and other abutters. So I just wanted to raise that. And a second concern, as I mentioned, was utility infrastructure. This development has precipitated a lot of activity by Eversource. I understand they're not under city jurisdiction or they have easements or whatever, but they did replace a pole on the corner of my lot, which is fine. It was a dilapidated pole. And now I'm told, I don't have any confirmation, nothing in writing, but now I'm told they're going to plant a second utility pole, this one on my side boundary to the east of my property. So it's like a 45-degree buttress, from what I understand, forming a triangle of telephone poles. So this is, if it is in the plans, this is clearly precipitated by the new development and in service of the development. And I have to say, all due respect to Joel and his counsel, that it is a little bit of a blight on my yard, diminishing my property value and perhaps that of other abutters. And I'm trying to install a pocket garden there between the aforementioned well-known property and myself. And so yes, it's going to change the essential character of the neighborhood in that regard. So yeah, I respect Joel, I respect the investment that's already been put in this property, but I do urge you, if you could, to take a clear-eyed look at the elevation and the new massing, and if you could put a stipulation on this, or condition, stipulation is a word I heard earlier, that all new utility poles and rigging and buttresses, etc., go on the applicant's property and not mine, or that I am compensated for this new triangle of telephone pole configuration that I hadn't banked on. So I think with those conditions, this would preserve the essential character of the neighborhood, I hope, preserve, I hope, my property values, and be in the public interest. Thanks a lot for your time. One other thing I did want to mention, there's been some damage to my chain link fence, but Joel kindly gave me a verbal offer that he would replace that, maybe even replace that chain link fence with wood. So I want to thank him for that. And I believe he's dealing in good faith.
Okay, any questions for the speaker? No? Thank you for calling it, participating.
Thank you.
If I may just...
Yeah, if you want to respond to some of that, we'd like to hear it.
Starting with the Eversource issue, that's not a developer issue. That's what Eversource requires. They determine what they need for poles. Apparently, it's on the property line or very close to the property line, one way or the other. But I don't think that's a site owner and developer site issue. That's Eversource, and the gentleman admitted that the pole that's there is dilapidated, so Eversource determines how they need to replace a pole and where they're going to go. So I don't know what we could say about that. In terms of the development, he mentioned a three-story building, but the sort of the third floor is within the roof line, so it's not a true three-story building. Its elevations, both ground level and its height, haven't changed. The only thing that's changed, of any significance, is we've gotten rid of some skylights on that gentleman's side and put in this, which is facing away from him.
Please speak into the microphone.
I'm sorry. And moved, as I said, that dormer's moved a little bit further out. And I fail to see how that change can negatively affect that neighbor compared to what was approved by this board 2 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, I would, if the caller is still talking, I would encourage him to call, as a starting point, call Public Works Department. They work with public utilities on things, on issues such as this. They might be able to help you, or at least explain why it's happening the way it is. Okay. Anybody else? Anything further? Apparently, last call for 2 for or against speakers. Seeing none, and we're clear. Are we clear, Mr. Stith? Okay. All right. Okay. Public hearing is closed. Board.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Mantle.
Question for the city staff. It's my first motion to amend. The only thing we have to consider is whether or not we like this drawing, because the variance has already been granted,
Correct.
So it's a question of whether we want to substitute the new plan over the old plan, and that's it.
That's correct. And just the changes to the building. The site plan changes will go through the administrative site plan process that will be likely signed off on by the planning director. So you're just looking at the changes to the building.
Oh, the elevations and the design.
Right.
Not the fence.
Right, that's that's by right typically, and the other site plan changes like the utilities will be part of that administrative site plan approval.
Okay.
So the proper motion would be to, grant the, well, we can't grant the variances, they've already been granted.
the
to-
changes.
Amend the prior approval
Amended.
with
Yeah.
the
As
changes.
amended.
As amended.
As amended.
Exactly, yeah. Okay. Is it, do I detect a motion in that? No?
No, it's.
Okay. Ms. Eldridge, yes, thank you.
I would like to move that we amend the previously approved variance thank you,
Yeah.
for this project. I think we recognize that the changes were made for some aesthetic reasons, some comfort reasons inside, practicality, costs, and it's a different design, but it doesn't really change what's happening to that property. And so, for that reason, I would request this amendment.
Thank you. Is there a second to that
Second.
motion? Thank you, Mr. Mennel. Okay. Ms. Eldridge, your motion, please.
Well, I don't really have much more to say than that the applicant explained why they thought they needed to make these changes, and we're not a design review board, but I don't think it changes the effect on the neighborhood, and therefore I think that it can go ahead as planned.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of hard to apply the traditional
Right.
5 to this sort of a request, yeah. Mr. Mennel,
I agree with Ms. Eldridge.
okay. All right. Mr. Lee, yeah.
I guess a point of order, are we voting on both the variance and the special exception at the same time? No.
We're just voting on the
I'm
amendment.
voting on the physical changes to the design as presented to us. We're not voting on the variances on this, all the special exception, actually. It's a bit of a twist,
Okay.
okay?
Got it.
All right. Anything further before we vote? All right, we're approving the changes as we see them on the drawings that we've been handed to us this evening. Okay. Excuse me. Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Mennel?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Appreciate
you're
it.
welcome. Okay. All right. We'll move on to item G, which is the request of Catherine Nolte and Angela Davis, owners, for property located at 276 Aldrich Road, whereas relief is needed to remove an existing mudroom, construct a covered front porch, which requires the following. 1, variances from section 10.521 to allow A, 33% building coverage where 20% is the maximum allowed. B, 7.5 feet left side yard where 10 feet is required. C, 7.5 feet of secondary front yard where 30 feet is required. 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 166 as Lot 14 and lies within the Single Residence B, SRB district. Who presents this case, please?
Kate Nolte, homeowner of 276 Aldrich.
Welcome.
Thank you for your time. Yes, we are proposing the removal of an existing mudroom that's 10 foot by 8 foot and replacing that with a covered front porch, the same depth as the current mudroom, but the width of the entire home. The purpose of this new construction is to fix the water and structural issues caused by the poor construction and design of that existing mudroom and create a usable outdoor space for us. We live on a corner lot, so it's hard to access the exterior from that lot, especially given the large easement and right-of-way on Sewell and Aldrich Road. That easement we've been maintaining since we've owned the property early in 2018. So we would like to have access to the outdoors as the same as all of the other neighbors that we have. As far as the 5 categories, the variance will not be contrary to public interests. The porch would not impede on abutting neighbors, as the width would not exceed the current width of the house or current depth of the existing mudroom. It would not alter the character of the neighborhood, but only enhance it. The spirit of the ordinance will be observed. The new porch would enhance the home's architectural aesthetic, bringing it up to the standards of the rest of the homes on the street. It would not threaten the health and safety of general public. Substantial justice will be done because the loss to the applicant would outweigh any to the general public. The values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. This would be a major improvement in relation to the current mudroom and would enhance the home's value and bring it up to standards of the majority of the homes in the neighborhood. And then literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. Again, due to the elevation of our home and it being a corner lot, we don't actually have access to an outdoor area unless we go out into the street in order to access it. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the board for the speaker at this point? No? All right. Thank you. Is there anyone else present who'd like to speak in favor of this proposal, please? Anyone else in favor? Mr. Zoom? Mr. Stithel? Mr. Zoom. You are.
No one has raised their hand.
No. Anybody present wishing to speak in opposition to this question? No? Anybody present or on Zoom wishing to speak to, for, or against? This is the last call for speakers. Last call. Going, gone. Public hearing is closed.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Discussion board, or perhaps a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
Make a motion to grant the variances as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Mantle. Is there a second to that motion to grant?
Second.
Mr. McDonald, thank you. Mr. Mantle, your motion.
Driving by this property today, taking out the mudroom and putting on the front porch would make it look like most of the other properties on Aldrich Avenue. The increase in building coverage is slight, as with any place on Aldrich. As far as the 5 criteria go, the variance is not contrary, granting the variance is not contrary to the public interest. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. Substantial justice is done. The values of the surrounding properties are not diminished, and literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. And because of this, I made the motion.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
I think Mr. Mantle has covered everything, and I don't see how to improve on that, so I will agree with him.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on the motion before we take the vote? Any discussion at all? No? Okay. Why don't we start up at the other end to vote in the opposite direction, just for variety's sake? Mr. Mantle.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Ms. Margison.
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge.
Yes.
And I vote yes,
Yes.
as well. The motion is passed. You're all set.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. All right. Just to repeat the earlier announcement, the next item, which dealt with a property at 108 Burkett Street, has been postponed by vote of this board and at the request of the applicant, so will not be heard tonight. And that takes us to item I, which is to the request of Thomas J. and Angela Maida owners for property located at 81 Taft Road, whereas relief is needed to construct a 235-square-foot addition, which requires the following. A variance from section 10.521 to allow a 17.5-foot secondary front yard where 30 feet is required. 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 247 as Lot 87 and lies within the Single Residence B SRB district. Who speaks in favor of this request, please?
My name is Dave Cicalone. I'm with Yankee Construction. I'm the general contractor for Tom and Angela Maida, and I'm speaking on their behalf this evening.
Okay, thank you.
With your permission, I did bring some extra photos. It was
Yes,
brought to my
yes,
attention.
start them down there if you would, please. That'd be great.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. McDowell.
I had a note that this one had requested postponement.
No.
No, no.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong case.
That's no problem.
Did that last week.
Wow, Technicolor.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, please go ahead.
Sure. From the figure over here, we can see we're proposing a small 235-square-foot addition in the, I guess that's the northwest corner of the home. Due to it being a corner lot, there is secondary frontage along Elwyn, so this is a previously non-conforming lot. The house was built within the setbacks, and so this addition actually would then extend into that secondary frontage along Elwyn. So I prepared the following statement in support of this variance application in accordance with Portsmouth zoning ordinance section 10.233.20. And so starting with the beginning, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. The proposed addition will not be contrary to the public interest. The overall addition footprint of the 235 square foot is small in size and will be constructed in a manner that will be architecturally similar to the home. The neighborhood is generally comprised of similar sized homes, with many of them which have had similar additions. And as far as the public interest at this point, the corner lot itself, as you can see in some of the photos I passed out, there was a previously existing fence that was there when Tom and Angela bought the property. It does not comply with town ordinance. It's too tall and too close to the road. The fence will actually be removed as a result of this project, and that view looking either, so the first two photos are effectively looking from the corner of Taft and Elwyn, looking west along Elwyn, kind of one zoomed out and one is zoomed in. And then the following two photos are from their rear abutters driveway looking east along Elwyn. So that entire fence line would be brought back, in line with that northern side of the house. And so it actually would quite improve the safety of that intersection with having a clearer line of sight around that house. As far as the spirit of the ordinance will be observed, typically in the single residential district, you have a 10-foot side yard setback, but due to this being a special lot on a corner, they do have that 30-foot secondary setback. And even still with this addition, they'll be 17.5 feet from that property line along Elwyn, so they will be within the 30 feet, but not, I think egregiously far, and it will be an improvement from the condition of that fence that exists there now. So the visual space will be improved. Substantial justice will be done. The proposed addition does not infringe upon any neighboring properties or homeowners. I think certainly from the photos you can see the rear abutter will have a much better view looking east along Elwyn when they're trying to merge out into traffic. It does not negatively affect the general public, and there would be no foreseeable gain to the general public by denying this variance, and alteration to the plan would result in unnecessary costs to the owners. They're just trying to do a master bedroom addition. That is where the current master bedroom is on the house. It's just quite small, and relocating that addition and any other portion on that house would require like significant alteration to their kitchen or bathrooms, areas that would be much more costly to modify and change. And due to the configuration of the backyard, even moving the addition over would really kind of impact the use. I think the enjoyment of that backyard. Whereas like that's kind of where they have some privacy from Elwyn on that side, and it would be right dead center of the yard to move it anywhere else within those setbacks as shown on that figure. The values of the surrounding properties will not be diminished. The proposed addition will be constructed in an aesthetically pleasing manner that would not diminish the values of the neighboring properties. The addition would be expected to add value to the home, thereby having a positive influence on the surrounding properties. And the last one, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. The proposed addition will be utilized as a master bedroom and has been situated on the property both to offer aesthetic value and function as the house is tied into the existing structure. Altering the location of the addition would require to be larger, either to be a larger in size or impact more of the existing home. Both instances would result in an unnecessary cost to the homeowners while offering no benefit in either aesthetic or function. And I guess I have a few notes on just the general lot dimensions and size of the home and so forth. Does the board have any questions for me?
Not at this point, I guess. No. If you want to give us just a very quick thumbnail of the size of the lot.
Sure. Yep. The lot size is it's 8,765 square feet, rounded off to 0.2 acres. The existing footprint of the home is 1,560 square feet. That includes the small garage that's on the southern end of the home. And so this proposed addition of 235 square feet brings that basically to a total of, what is that, 1,795 square feet. I believe when you do the math on that, it's actually at 20% coverage on that lot. Then if you add the driveway coverage and some other impervious coverage due to a small patio out back, the total lot coverage would be in effect 22% covered.
Okay. Anything further from the board at this point? I guess not. Thank you. Anyone else present wishing to speak in favor of this, please come up. Anybody at all? Anybody on Zoom, Mr. Stith? No? Okay, we're clear. Okay. Anybody in opposition? Any speakers in opposition in present or in Zoom? No? Okay, clear. Last call for speakers on this project in any fashion. Okay. We're closed with the public hearing. Excuse me. What's your desire on this board? Anybody have a motion? Ms. Eldridge, did I detect?
Okay, I'll do it.
Thank you. Oh. What a smooth talker. Yeah, I am. Yeah.
I think this is a very modest request. I think for the change, and having a secondary front yard always seems to complicate things. It creates its own hardship, often enough. So I think that the change in the slight change in the front yard, for that slight change, I think they're getting I think the Miters are getting a big advantage, and I think that it's a good trade-off. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public. Oh, sorry, do I need to say? I do this.
No. Okay.
Second.
That's all right. No, my fault. Okay. Second, Mr. Mantle.
There you go.
Thank you. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. It would observe the spirit of the ordinance. They're improving their home. They're not changing the character of the neighborhood in any way. It would do substantial justice. The change for the family would be far greater than any effect it would have on anybody else. It certainly won't diminish property values at all. It's a nice new addition, a slightly larger home. It might even increase the values. There's no substantial relationship, does not exist between the general public purposes of the ordinance and the specific application of that provision to the property. And the proposed use is very much a reasonable one. And for those reasons, I suggest that we approve this.
Thank you very much.
I agree with everything Ms. Eldridge said. It's a very small request, and because it's on a corner lot, it's got that quirky double-sided front yard. So I will support the motion.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, the neighbor on that side is the street, yeah, Elwin. Yeah. Okay, anything further? If not, let's vote on the motion, which is to approve, as presented. Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So you're all set. You're approved. Yep, you're welcome.
It's 10, so we need to take a vote to go past 10.
Yep. Yeah, it's time. Time for our traditional, if we wish to proceed with any new business after 10 o'clock. Will someone be interested in doing that?
We have one
I would
case.
move we soldier on.
Thank you. Second? Was that a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. Voice vote will be fine. Those in favor of proceeding?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, aye. Opposed? None? Okay. We will charge on. And the last item of the evening, item J on the agenda, reads as follows. The request of Christopher Mulligan, applicant and 140 West Road condos owner for a property located at 140 West Road, whereas relief is needed to convert an existing structure into a private indoor recreation facility, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.440 use number 4.30 to allow the indoor recreation use where the use is not permitted. 2, a variance from section 10.1113.41 to allow parking to be located 2 feet from the front lot line where 50 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 252 as Lot 2-13 and lies within the industrial district. Who speaks in favor, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Now for something completely different. This is a request for a use variance in the industrial zone with setback variance thrown in as seasoning for the dish. But for the record, I'm Chris Mulligan from Boson and Associates here in Portsmouth. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. The actual applicant is Road to the West, LLC. That's the owner of the property. With me is Alex Choquette, the principal of Road to the West. Also with me is Grant Shambo, sitting behind him, who would be the general manager of this facility should it get approved. I also have with us the design and engineering team, Mark Giannani from McHenry Architects and Alex Ross from Ross Engineering. So the proposal here is to convert the former Blitz trampoline park at 140 West Road into a private, member-only indoor recreation facility. Mr. Choquette's background is, among other things, owning and operating fitness centers and clubs, so he has a lot of experience running facilities that operate on a similar membership-only basis. And just a little bit about Mr. Choquette. He's very philanthropically inclined. He's on the board of the new Mona Museum of New Art, which is on the first floor of Jimmy's on Congress Street. He's also been heavily involved with Crossroads and Gather, and he hopes to be able to use this facility and make it available for charitable events in the future, because it really is a unique facility the way they've planned to use it. He also has agreed with Chief Newport to allow the police department to use the facility for the laser rifles and other handgun type training. So we feel that this should be a positive benefit to the community to allow this project to go forward. But in general, the project would be to make a series of internal improvements to the property, where we would have various indoor gaming recreation stations, for lack of a better word. We'd have various golf sport simulators. There, I think, as you can see on the plans, axe throwing lanes, billiards, arcade games. There will be a small gym area and an accessory lounge area. In addition, there will be over 3,000 square feet of office space at the facility, a portion of which would be accessory to this particular use. The building is in the industrial zone. This is not a permitted use. Frankly, it's not a permitted use anywhere in the city, but it's certainly not a permitted use in the industrial zone. In 2013, I believe it was, the prior owner obtained a special exception to operate the Blitz facility at this location under what I think was a pretty generous and liberal reading of the ordinance, which permits health clubs by special exception. It's a trampoline park, but it ran a similar model. It was on a membership model similar to a health club. And that's the same model we expect, or that we intend to run for the indoor recreation club that we're proposing. And some of the benefits of that is it will permit us to establish reservations if it's necessary, and also to control and coordinate the use of the facility and movement onto and off of it. So that's the use. We also need a variance because some of the improvements we're proposing to the site will move the parking area closer to West Road. In an industrial zone, we're required to have parking facilities and infrastructure at least 50 feet from the front of the property. As it stands, at its closest point, the parking area is 6.5 feet. With the improvements we're making, which include putting in code-compliant 24-foot travel aisles, at its closest point, the parking structures will be 2 feet from the property line. So it's already a pre-existing non-conforming condition, and we'll be making it slightly more non-conforming, although I don't think anybody's going to ever notice. But we're doing that because we're making the travel aisles conforming, and it's just a safety issue. We would expect that as we move through site review, they'll make us do that anyway, so we've just engineered it into the plans. So that's the relief we need for the parking setback. So that's the project. The variances we need, I think we meet all the criteria for the variance, both variances. So granting the variances will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, nor will it be contrary to the public interest. Again, you have to consider those together, and the test is whether or not if the variances are granted, would the project substantially alter the characteristics of the neighborhood or threaten the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Here, the essential characteristics of the neighborhood would remain completely unchanged, in my opinion. This is a fully developed site. We're not proposing any major changes to it. The structure itself, the building, will not change in any material way. The use of the building that we're proposing, I think, is similar enough in character to the previously approved indoor health club, which was really a trampoline park, that the essential character of the neighborhood will not be changed. This is a very varied neighborhood. You've got a supermarket, you've got a public utility storage station, you've got the DPW, you've got a number of commercial entities nearby. There was a skating rink that was actually approved a few years back further down West Road, but never built. So the essential character of the neighborhood will not be changed. This still has to go through site review if we get past this hurdle tonight, so the health, safety, and welfare of the public will be adequately protected. Substantial justice will be done. Whether or not substantial justice is done by granting a variance requires you to balance the loss to the applicant if the variance is denied against some gain to the public if strict conformance with the zoning ordinance is required. Here I don't see what gain there would be to the public. Again, this is a fully developed site. We have some communication, and I'm going to asked to approach.
Thank you, sir.
From our nearest abutter, Standard of New England Plumbing Supply, they're in favor of the request. So I don't see I don't see how there is a loss to the public or to any private rights by granting the variance that we're requesting. In addition, the improvements that we're proposing to the site will require relief from the parking setback. However, the trade-off for that is that we will be constructing and installing code-compliant and safe maneuvering aisles on the site, which is a benefit to the public. So substantial justice will be done by granting these variances. Values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. The mass and scale of the existing building stays exactly as is. All of the material changes to this property will be inside where nobody will notice them unless they're actually visiting the facility. Again, fully developed site. There's no significant changes except changes that are going to be for the better. And again, we have a letter from the nearest affected abutter fully in favor. So values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. Finally, there are special conditions associated with this property which prevent its proper enjoyment under the strict terms of the zoning ordinance, constituting an unnecessary hardship. So the unique factors with this property are its existing built environment and the fact that it's situated at a 90-degree bend in West Road. So it has a significant amount of frontage that's subject to the 50-foot parking setback. It doesn't have any side yards. So those are unique characteristics. It's non-conforming as to the parking setback as it is. The prior use was permitted by special exception, but we feel this is similar in concept, or similar enough in concept that there's no fair and substantial relationship between the prohibition of indoor recreation and its application to this particular property. The use is a reasonable one. There are a variety of commercial, industrial, municipal, and other uses in the immediate neighborhood. This will not impose any unnecessary or unworkable burden on the environment or on the surrounding neighborhood. So it is a reasonable use. And then there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance and its application to this property. The parking setback relief is minimal, and it's necessary to accomplish other ends, that is to make it a more safe and compliant conforming travel aisles. And as I've stated, the prior use as a trampoline park is similar enough in character to what we're proposing here that prohibiting it makes no sense in my opinion. So the purposes of the ordinance is not frustrated in any manner by what we're proposing, and we hope you agree that this is a good reuse of this existing built environment on the site and grant the variances we've requested.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Margison?
Yes, so Chris, you had said that private indoor recreation was not allowed anywhere in the ordinance, but.
I think I probably misspoke.
Okay. You may want to rephrase that. No, indoor recreation uses are allowed by the ordinance. I don't think they make a distinction between private and public.
I think that's a better way of saying what I should have said.
Okay. Because there is a golf place that moved into the Tuscan Market that
That's
is
right.
a private indoor recreational use.
That's correct.
Okay, so it is allowed in a lot of the zones of the city, CD5, office and whatnot, either by special exception or just outright permission. So that's it.
Yep, you're correct. Thank you.
Anything further at this point? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone present who wishes to add to the positive comments? Anybody else in favor of the project wishing to speak? Mr. Sith? No? Okay. Anybody in opposition? Anybody wish to address the board in opposition on site or via Zoom? No? Okay. All right, thanks. 2 for against, last call. Seeing nobody, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, what's your pleasure with respect to this application?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Mantle.
Question for the staff.
Sure.
And going to Chris's original point, if Blitz Air Park did not go for the special exception, whatever the liberal reading was, and went for a variance, he wouldn't have to get this now, correct?
I believe he would, because it's a completely different, it's not a trampoline park. They would have gotten approval for a trampoline park. And this
An indoor
is-
recreational facility.
Right, but it's what's presented. So they were presenting a trampoline park. There's no trampolines.
Okay,
It's
okay.
completely different. So even if this was a special exception, they would need to come. Yeah.
So here we are.
I remember that. Yeah, my initial impression was the same as yours. Is I remembered that, and I consider that one's one kind of an indoor recreational use, and another kind of an indoor
It's
recreational use.
presented, not just the use.
Yeah, I remember that case when it came up the last time, and way back it had other uses as well, which weren't mentioned. Do you remember, Ms. Eldridge? Yes. Yeah, it was a store in there one time. Yeah.
So and just to note,
Ms.
the zoning
Ms.
ordinance
Margin.
does say that it cites some examples of indoor recreation use, such as a bowling alley or an arcade, but that list is not exhaustive. It is just meant to describe an indoor recreation use.
Yeah,
So-
sort of examples, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a similar application in some ways. I have much less problems with this because of the application of Blitz in the same area for so long, which I had actually been inside. I also don't think there's this sort of heavy industrial use around this particular property that we saw early in the evening. So I think I'm in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. Any other general comments about the proposal? If not, does someone have a motion they're willing to offer? He or she? I should say. Anybody? Mr. Lee?
Yeah, I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion to approve, please?
Second.
Second, Mr. Mannell, thank you. Mr. Lee, your motion.
All right, so we have two variance applications, one to allow indoor and indoor recreation where the use is not permitted, and to allow parking 2 feet from the front line where 50 feet is required. I think both those requests are not contrary to the spirit of the ordinance and not contrary to the public intent. They observe that, as the speaker said, the first use is certainly reasonable. It's going to be basically a indoor recreational facility with laser shooting and golf and axe throwing and all that sort of thing. So that certainly is what qualifies that. And the as for the parking located, as again the applicant said, it's going to make the travel lanes more code compliant and easier to maneuver in. So that seems to check that box. Moving on down the criteria, substantial justice here is done. The benefit to the applicant is not outweighed by any harm to the general public or anybody else. Because of this is in a kind of an industrial retail area, I don't see any values to the surrounding properties being diminished in any way. And literal enforcement of this ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. The unnecessary hardship in this case would be because of the applicant is burdened by the zoning restriction in that this use is not permitted without the variance. So that would make this property distinctly different from similarly situated properties. And the proposed use is a reasonable one. So for those reasons, I would move both these variances be approved.
Thank you. Your second, please. Go there. Oh, sorry.
I agree with what Mr. Lee said. Can't add to it.
Thank you. Anything further before we take the vote? Okay.
I would just like to say that, I mean, it doesn't seem like an industrial use cannot take place on this property, but I do note that this property has been vacant for a while. I don't see any industries
Rushing to get in there.
rushing to get in there. So.
No, it's
It was at first.
big
Yeah, it
plain
was.
Jane building just sitting there, yeah. Okay. If there's nothing further, we'll vote starting down there. Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Mannell?
Yes.
Mannell? And I vote yes as well. Thank you. Okay, done.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Bye.
Okay. Have we been here long enough, Board?
Yes.
If so, some would say. I think you get an
Mr.
easy
Chairman, I
vote.
make a motion
Get
to
an easy
adjourn.
vote on that one. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Mannell, did I hear? Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second, thank you. Those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? None. Right, thank you. We're done.